If you enjoy videos like this, subscribe to the channel before the video starts. The sun was slowly setting behind the tall pine trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma had finally arrived at her cabin. She had been waiting for this weekend for weeks. Her little cabin in the woods was her escape from the busy city life. It was small, cozy, and surrounded by nature. The air smelled fresh, and the only sounds were birds chirping and the wind moving through the trees. Emma took a deep breath and smiled. This was exactly what she needed. She carried her bags inside and set them down on the wooden floor. The cabin smelled faintly of old wood and pine, which she loved. Emma had worked hard to buy this land, and she loved having a place where she could be completely alone. She looked around and checked the small kitchen, the living area, and the little bedroom upstairs. Everything was perfect. After unpacking, she stepped outside and walked around her property. The land stretched behind the cabin with tall trees and a small clearing where she had built a fire pit. She had spent months planning this space, imagining the peaceful evenings she would have here. Tonight, she planned to make a fire, roast some marshmallows, and watch the stars. As she walked back to the cabin, she noticed something unusual. A small piece of paper was pinned to the gate. Squinting in the fading light, she read it. It looked like a notice from the HOA, the Homeowners Association. Emma frowned. She rarely received letters from them, and usually, they were about small things like paying fees or following minor rules. She picked up the paper and read it quickly. The notice said something about property regulations and compliance, but the words were vague. Emma sighed. She had followed all the rules as far as she knew. She didn't have time to worry about it now. After all, she was here to relax, not stress over legal papers. Folding the notice, she tossed it onto the kitchen counter and shrugged it off. Emma decided to sit on the porch and enjoy the view. She watched as the sun dipped lower behind the trees, and the sky turned darker. The first stars started to appear. Everything felt calm and peaceful. She took a sip of her coffee and leaned back in the chair. For the first time in months, she felt completely free. As the night grew darker, Emma started a fire in the fire pit. The flames danced and crackled, sending tiny sparks into the air. She roasted marshmallows and smiled to herself. The world felt far away, and this moment felt perfect. She thought about how lucky she was to have this little cabin. After a while, she decided to take a short walk around the property before it got too dark. She carried a flashlight with her and stepped carefully through the clearing. The trees cast long shadows, and the wind whispered through the branches. She felt a strange mix of excitement and calm. Being alone in the woods at night was a little scary, but she loved the feeling. When she returned to the cabin, she noticed something strange. The gate, which usually hung loosely and opened easily, seemed different. She walked closer and tried to push it open, but it wouldn't move. Confused, she jiggled the handle. Nothing. It was locked. Emma frowned. She had the key, but it didn't fit. She tried again. Still nothing. Her heart started to beat faster. That's strange, she muttered. She looked around the gate, checking for anything unusual, but everything seemed normal. The lock looked intact, and there were no signs of damage. A feeling of unease crept over her. She thought about the HOA notice again. Could this be related? No, it didn't make sense. She had never had any serious problems with them before. Emma took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. Maybe it was just a mechanical problem. She would figure it out in the morning. But then she noticed something else. There were new tire marks near the gate, as if someone had driven a vehicle close to it recently. And small footprints in the dirt, not hers, and not familiar. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't alone here, was she? Emma's mind raced. Could someone be watching her? The woods were dark, and she couldn't see much beyond the edge of her property. She grabbed her flashlight and shone it around, but nothing moved. Just trees and shadows. Trying to stay calm, she went back inside the cabin and locked the doors behind her. She sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the HOA notice and the locked gate. What was happening? Why would someone lock her in her own property? Minutes passed, and the night grew darker. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves outside. Emma could hear strange noises, twigs snapping, leaves moving, but every time she looked out the window, nothing was there. Her heart raced. She tried to tell herself it was just animals, maybe a deer or a raccoon. But deep down, she knew this felt different. She walked to the window and looked at the gate again. It was solid, locked, and unmovable. Panic began to creep in. This was her only way out. If something happened, how would she get help? She reached for her phone to call someone, but the signal was weak. Very weak. She could barely make out the numbers. Emma felt trapped. Her cozy cabin, which had felt like a paradise just an hour ago, now felt like a cage. She had never imagined that owning land in the woods could feel dangerous. And the thought that the HOA could be involved made her blood run cold. She tried to calm herself, taking slow breaths. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe it was just a simple mistake, a broken lock, a malfunctioning gate. But something deep inside her whispered that this was more than that. As she sat on the porch again, flashlight in hand, she stared at the gate and the surrounding darkness. Her mind raced with possibilities. Who had locked the gate? Why? And was she truly alone out here in the woods? The night grew quieter, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. She felt a shiver run down her spine. This was supposed to be her weekend of peace. Instead, it had turned into something she didn't understand, something frightening. She took a deep breath, trying to remind herself of the calm she had felt just a few hours ago. Maybe she could figure this out in the morning. Maybe it was nothing serious. But as she looked at the locked gate one last time before heading inside, she couldn't help but feel a growing fear. Somewhere out there, in the shadows of the trees, something had changed. And Emma knew, deep down, that this weekend would not be as peaceful as she had imagined. Little did she know, the events of this night were just the beginning. The calm before the storm was over. The first sound came from the gate. A sharp, metallic click echoed in the quiet night. Emma froze, her heart skipping a beat. She had been inside the cabin, pacing nervously, trying to convince herself that the locked gate was just a mistake. But this sound, it was deliberate. She grabbed her flashlight and crept to the window. Outside, the darkness seemed alive. Shadows shifted among the trees, and the faint outline of the gate shimmered in the moonlight. Emma's mind raced. Someone was out there. Someone had locked her in her own property. For a moment, she tried to stay calm. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe a branch had hit the lock. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Her instincts screamed danger. She ran to the door, pulled at the handle. Locked. She tried the key again. Nothing. Panic began to rise. She ran back to the kitchen and checked her phone. Still no signal. The battery was low, and even if she could call, would anyone answer at this hour? The woods around her were silent now, too silent, as if holding their breath. Emma's eyes darted around the cabin. Every shadow seemed to move. Every noise felt like someone approaching. She remembered the footprints she had seen earlier. They weren't hers. Someone had walked here. Someone had planned this. Her breathing became shallow. She sat down heavily at the table, running her hands through her hair. This couldn't be happening. She had always felt safe here. This was her sanctuary, her escape. Now it felt like a trap. The thought of being stuck here overnight, completely alone, filled her with dread. Trying to regain control, she moved toward the windows again. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and the faint outline of the fence. Yet the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Emma shivered. Someone was out there, waiting, watching, maybe even laughing at her fear. She needed a plan. First, she tried the gate one more time, testing it from every angle. She pushed, pulled, jiggled the handle. Nothing. The lock was unyielding. Next, she tried to think of another exit. There was a small trail at the edge of the property that led into the woods. Maybe she could squeeze through there. But as she stepped outside, the cold night air hit her. The trail looked darker and more threatening than she remembered. Her foot brushed against something. She bent down and shone the flashlight. Another footprint, fresh, in the dirt. It led away from the cabin into the trees. Her stomach tightened. Whoever had locked the gate had been here recently. And they had left, or were hiding nearby. Emma's mind spun with possibilities. Could it really be the HOA? They had sent her that vague notice earlier, but locking her in? That seemed extreme. Maybe it was someone else, a neighbor with a grudge, or a stranger wandering through the woods. But why target her? Why block the only way out of her land? She needed help. But the phone signal was nearly dead, and even if she managed to call, would anyone believe her story? I'm trapped, my gate is locked, someone is outside, she imagined saying. It sounded crazy, even to herself. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She paced the cabin, trying to think. She considered leaving through the side trail, but the woods were dark, thick, and unfamiliar at night. One wrong step, and she could be injured, lost, or worse. Every horror story she had ever read about people disappearing in the woods flashed through her mind. Suddenly, a soft rustling came from outside. Emma froze. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. The sound was close now, just beyond the porch. A branch snapped. She could feel eyes on her, though she couldn't see anyone. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. She backed into the cabin, locking the door behind her. Her mind raced faster than ever. Maybe the lock on the gate wasn't about her land. Maybe it was a message. A warning. She thought about all the small disagreements she had ever had with the HOA, a complaint about a fence, a notice about fire safety, or rule about the property line. They were minor, nothing serious. But someone could be taking things too far. Emma's hands shook. She realized something terrifying. She was completely cut off. No signal, no way to open the gate, no backup plan. Panic surged through her veins, burning like fire. Her safe haven had become a prison. She moved toward the window again, peering into the darkness. The flashlight caught a glimpse of something metallic near the gate, a glint in the moonlight. Emma squinted. It looked like a camera? Someone was watching her. Every movement, every step, every moment was being monitored. Her chest tightened. The fear was real now. She wasn't just trapped, she was being controlled. Someone had planned this. Someone wanted her to feel powerless. The wind rustled the trees outside, almost like a whisper, there is nowhere to go. Emma knew she couldn't stay calm forever. She had to act. She considered barricading herself inside, waiting for morning. But what if the person outside didn't leave? What if it escalated? She needed a plan, any plan. Her eyes fell on the small side window near the kitchen. Maybe she could climb out and follow the perimeter of the land to find another exit. It was risky, but doing nothing wasn't an option. Her mind spun with every possibility, weighing danger against desperation. She crouched, testing the window. It was small, but she could fit through if she moved carefully. The thought of leaving the cabin into the unknown woods at night made her stomach churn. Every step outside would be a risk, but staying inside felt like a slow suffocation. Emma's pulse was still racing. She breathed deeply, trying to steady herself. She told herself, I can do this. I have to do this. She wasn't just fighting the locked gate, she was fighting fear itself. The calm she had felt hours ago had vanished. In its place was something stronger, determination fueled by terror. And yet, as she prepared to climb through the window, she couldn't shake one chilling thought. Whoever had locked the gate was still out there. They had planned this. They might be watching every move she made. The woods were dark, the cabin isolated, and her only hope was courage and luck. The night had changed. Her peaceful retreat was gone, replaced by something unknown, something dangerous. Emma knew that the real test was just beginning. The gate was only the first obstacle. Whatever lay ahead, she had to face it alone, afraid, but not broken. And somewhere in the shadows, the watcher waited, unseen and silent, ready to see how far she would go. The first sound of the night was a low, distant hum. Emma froze. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was mechanical, subtle, almost like someone was revving an engine far away, but close enough that she could feel it in her chest. She pressed her back against the cabin wall, heart hammering. The darkness outside seemed alive, pulsing with that strange vibration. Her phone lay on the counter, screen dim, barely showing bars. She snatched it up. 1 bar. Maybe 2 if she held it just right. She tried calling the HOA office, her friends, anyone she could think of, but the calls didn't go through. Only the endless buzzing of a signal lost in the woods. Panic surged again. Emma's mind raced. Every second counted. She had to find a way to communicate, or at least figure out what was happening. She moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The gate loomed in the moonlight, silent and unmoving, like a warning. The footprints were still there, faint in the dirt, but she could see them now leading not just away from the gate but deeper into the trees. Someone had been walking around her property, watching, waiting. She remembered the small radio she kept for emergencies. It was in the cabin, tucked under the bed. Emma ran upstairs, flipping open the drawer. She pulled out the radio and twisted the knob, hoping to catch a signal, anything, even static. White noise crackled in her ears. Then, faintly, a voice came through. "Hello? Anyone out there? Over?" Emma froze. Her hands shook as she spoke into the radio. "Yes. Yes, I'm here. I'm trapped at my cabin. The gate is locked. Please help." Static. The voice returned, faint but clearer. "Where? Cabin, location, over." Emma tried to explain, but the radio cut out. The signal was weak, breaking apart with every word. Her heart sank. She had a lifeline, but it was barely working, barely enough to reach anyone. She slammed the radio down, frustrated, and looked outside again. Shadows moved at the edge of the property. A figure? She wasn't sure. The hum had stopped. Silence swallowed the night, heavier than before. Emma felt trapped between fear and desperation. She needed a plan. She tried the gate one more time. Her hands pressed against the metal. Cold, unyielding. Whoever had locked it had done it right. It wouldn't budge, not an inch. The thought that someone had prepared this carefully made her stomach churn. They had watched, waited, maybe even anticipated every move she would make. Emma's eyes flicked to the small side trail. Could she make it to the woods and somehow get out? She grabbed her flashlight and ran along the perimeter of the cabin, moving slowly and quietly. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made her heart jump. The trail was darker than she remembered. The trees loomed overhead, shadows thick and twisting. She almost stumbled over something. It was a piece of paper, pinned to a tree. Emma picked it up with trembling hands. Written in bold letters was, "Stop. Stay inside. This is your only warning." Her pulse raced. Whoever was doing this was watching her. Every step, every movement. This was no accident. This was intentional. The words on the paper made her stomach twist with fear. She shoved it in her pocket, knowing it was both a warning and proof that she was not alone. Emma's mind raced. She had to communicate, had to get help, had to do something before it got worse. She grabbed the flashlight again and tried signaling. She waved it frantically toward the edge of the property, hoping someone nearby could see it. But the darkness swallowed the light. No answer. No movement. Nothing. Hours seemed to pass, though it could have been minutes. Her fear made time stretch. She tried the radio again, fiddling with the knob, twisting, turning, desperately searching for a signal. White noise, static, a faint voice calling out and disappearing again. Each failed attempt tightened the knot in her chest. Then, she noticed something she hadn't before, small footprints leading around the cabin. Not far, just circling, like someone had walked in a deliberate pattern, watching. Emma held her breath. Whoever had done this was close. She could feel it, a presence pressing from the shadows. She thought about calling the police, but her phone signal was gone. Even if she reached someone, would they believe her? I'm trapped. I'm being watched, my cabin is blocked. It sounded crazy. And yet, it was true. Every instinct in her body screamed that she was in real danger. Emma decided to make a list of options. Wait inside and hope whoever was outside left. Try to escape through the woods, risking getting lost or caught. Keep trying to communicate via the radio. She shook her head. None of them felt safe. Waiting felt like giving up. Escaping was dangerous. Communicating seemed almost impossible. And yet, doing nothing was not an option. She moved to the side window again, listening. The hum had returned, soft this time, almost like breathing. She held the flashlight up, scanning the woods, searching for anything moving. Shadows danced just beyond the beam, just out of reach. Emma swallowed hard. She felt completely exposed, small, and alone. Her thoughts turned to the HOA notice. Could this be related? It didn't make sense. The letter had been vague, but this was something else entirely. Whoever had done this wanted to intimidate her, scare her, control her. She realized something terrifying. The problem wasn't just the locked gate. The problem was someone watching her, controlling her every move. Emma clenched her fists. Fear surged, but with it came determination. She couldn't just wait. She had to act. She would try the radio again, signal for help, and keep looking for any way out. She refused to be trapped without a fight. But as she adjusted the knob on the radio, a sharp, metallic sound echoed outside. Emma froze. This time, it was not far away. Close. Too close. She could hear it clearly, the sound of metal scraping against metal, footsteps crunching in the dirt. She backed away slowly from the window, her mind spinning. Whoever was out there knew she was trying to communicate. They were aware, observing, patient. Her cabin was no longer a sanctuary, it was a trap. And in the darkness, the night seemed to close in around her, thick and heavy. Emma realized with chilling clarity, help might not come in time. She was on her own. The hum grew louder, sharper, closer. The radio buzzed faintly in her hand, a weak connection, almost taunting her. She whispered to herself, I have to survive. I have to get out. The night stretched on, every second a battle between fear and determination. Emma knew one thing for sure, she couldn't stay still. She couldn't wait. She had to act. And somewhere outside, in the darkness, someone or something was watching, waiting for her next move. The first light of dawn was barely creeping over the horizon, painting the forest in gray and silver. Emma's eyes snapped open. Her muscles were tense, every nerve screaming. Last night had been endless footsteps, shadows, the locked gate, the faint hum in the distance, but now, the world was quieter. Too quiet. She knew she couldn't stay inside any longer. She sat up slowly, listening. The cabin creaked as if it were alive, groaning under the weight of silence. Outside, a single crow cawed, breaking the stillness. Emma's pulse quickened. She couldn't risk waiting for someone to find her. She had to escape tonight, or even in the daylight, the gate remained locked. She crouched by the side window, thinking fast. The small gap in the fence she had noticed before might be her only chance. The ground outside was damp from last night's dew. She knew the woods were thick, the path uneven, but staying here meant being trapped, maybe forever. Emma gritted her teeth. She didn't know who had locked her in, but she wasn't going to wait to find out. She slid the window open silently and tested the climb. The drop was higher than she remembered. Her fingers brushed against the rough wooden frame. Taking a deep breath, she swung her legs out, landing softly on the cold, wet grass. She winced, feeling the sharp sting of thorns against her ankle. But she didn't stop. She had no time to stop. Emma moved quickly, sticking to the shadows of the cabin. Every step crunched against the forest floor, every fallen branch snapping underfoot. Her heart hammered in her chest. Somewhere behind her, she thought she heard a faint shuffle, a sound too deliberate to be an animal. She froze, holding her breath. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Then she remembered the footprints. Someone had been circling the cabin, watching her. If they were still nearby. Emma didn't want to think about it. She moved faster, weaving between trees, trying to keep low. The trail she had hoped to follow was faint, overgrown with roots and bushes. She stumbled once, catching herself on a tree. Her hands were scratched and bleeding, but she didn't care. Every second counted. Suddenly, a sharp snap sounded behind her. Emma's stomach dropped. Someone or something was moving. She didn't dare look back. She ran blindly, hoping the trees would hide her. Her flashlight, barely charged, flickered, illuminating twisted roots and patches of fog. The woods seemed endless, the shadows shifting like dark hands trying to grab her. She reached a small clearing, panting, her legs trembling. The gate was still far behind, a silent reminder of her imprisonment. Emma scanned the area, looking for another exit, some narrow path that could lead her to safety. And then she saw it, a small gap between two thick trees, barely wide enough to squeeze through. Her only option. She moved toward it slowly, careful not to make a sound. The hum from last night had returned, soft but steady, vibrating in the air. Emma's heart raced. The sound was closer now, coming from the direction of the gate. Whoever had locked her in was still there, still waiting, still watching. She had no time to hesitate. Emma squeezed through the gap, brushing against rough bark and spider webs. Her clothes snagged, tearing in a few places, but she didn't care. Once through, she found herself in a narrow trail that led deeper into the woods. The trees loomed over her, shadows stretching like fingers. Every step was a gamble, every sound a potential threat. Then she heard it, a low growl. Emma froze. She strained her eyes in the dim light. A dog? Something worse? The growl repeated, closer this time. Panic surged, but she forced herself to move. She ran again, faster now, zigzagging through the trees, using every instinct she had to stay quiet yet escape. The forest seemed to close in around her. Branches whipped her face and arms. Roots threatened to trip her with every step. She stumbled and almost fell, but caught herself on a tree trunk. Her flashlight flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. Emma's heart thudded violently. The hum was louder now, and she could hear footsteps behind her, light, deliberate, matching her pace. She didn't dare look back. One wrong move, and she could be caught. She jumped over a fallen log, slid under a branch, and finally reached another small clearing. Moonlight filtered through the trees, showing her a faint path that might lead to the main road. It was a narrow trail, almost invisible, but it was the only chance she had. Emma ran, stumbling over roots and rocks, every step making her lungs burn. She could feel eyes on her, but couldn't tell if it was human or something else. Her mind raced. Should she scream? Should she hide? No, hiding was worse. She had to move, always move. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she stumbled onto a slightly wider path. She slowed, listening, trying to catch her breath. The forest around her was eerily quiet now. Too quiet. Had she lost them? Or were they waiting for her at the next bend? She couldn't know. She had to keep going. Finally, Emma saw a faint light in the distance, a cabin, maybe, or a road. Her heart leapt. Hope surged. She ran toward it, her legs trembling but carrying her faster than ever. Every shadow, every rustle in the trees, felt like a threat, but she pushed forward, fueled by fear and determination. And then, she heard it, the metallic click again. The sound of the gate behind her. Someone had come back. Emma didn't stop. She ran harder, her breath ragged, sweat and blood mixing on her hands and face. The light ahead grew brighter. Freedom was just ahead, but she couldn't relax. Whoever had trapped her wasn't far behind. Emma finally reached the edge of the woods, seeing a road barely visible through the trees. She collapsed onto the gravel, gasping for air, heart pounding, hands shaking. She looked back toward her cabin, the gate hidden among the shadows. Somewhere out there, someone was watching, waiting. But for now, she was free. At least for a moment. Emma crouched behind the thick underbrush, the early morning mist curling around her like ghostly fingers. Her lungs burned, but she didn't dare stop. The cabin was hidden behind her now, and the locked gate, the warning notes, the footprints, all of it loomed in her mind like a puzzle she had to solve. Whoever had trapped her had done it carefully, deliberately. Someone had planned this. And Emma knew she needed to find out who. She scanned the road ahead. A car was parked a short distance away, half hidden under a tree. A small HOA sticker glimmered faintly in the morning light on the windshield. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Could they be here already? Or was it left as a warning? She ducked lower, moving quietly, every step measured, careful not to be seen. Her plan was simple, she needed answers. She had to understand why the HOA would go this far, locking her gate, watching her every move. But she also needed evidence. Something she could show the police, or at least use to protect herself if things escalated. Emma remembered the letters she had received from the HOA over the past months. Most were minor, a note about trimming trees, a warning about fire safety, another about keeping her driveway clear. Nothing serious. Nothing that should have led to this. But now, she realized, there was a pattern. The letters had always arrived before a major incident. The timing, she thought, might not have been coincidence. She pulled the HOA notices from her bag, spreading them on a flat rock nearby. Each one was typed neatly, impersonal, but something about them now seemed cold, calculated. She noticed small details she hadn't seen before, stamps, signatures, even slight variations in the wording that made some notices sound threatening, almost like warnings. A sudden sound made her jump. Leaves rustled behind her. Emma froze, holding her breath. A man stepped out from behind a tree, a groundskeeper? Or a neighbor? He wore a plain uniform with no identifying badge, and he didn't seem to notice her. She ducked lower, careful not to move. The man walked slowly toward the cabin, carrying a clipboard. He paused at the gate, jotted something down, and then disappeared back into the woods. Emma's pulse raced. This wasn't random. They were watching, recording, tracking her. Whoever it was, they were organized. And now, she realized, the HOA might be more than just a simple homeowners association. They had resources, knowledge of her property, and the power to manipulate her life without her realizing it. Determined, Emma crept closer to the road, careful to stay in the shadows. She needed proof, something solid. Her eyes scanned the ground. Fresh tire tracks. Tiny pieces of tape stuck to tree trunks, markers. Small devices she hadn't noticed before. Cameras? Motion sensors? Someone had rigged this property. Her land was under surveillance, every step logged. She crouched down to inspect a small device partially hidden under leaves. A blinking light confirmed it was active. Emma's stomach turned. Whoever had done this had been monitoring her every move for weeks, maybe months. They had studied her patterns, predicted her routines. The HOA notices weren't just letters, they were a psychological trap, a prelude to the lockdown of her gate. Emma backed away silently, her mind spinning. She needed to confront them, but she couldn't do it blindly. She had to gather more evidence, find out how deep this went. Her cabin wasn't just trapped anymore. It was under siege. She returned to her car, parked a safe distance from the cabin, and started reviewing the HOA emails she had on her laptop. Most were routine, but one caught her eye. It was hidden in a folder she rarely checked. The subject line was simple: property compliance urgent. But the contents were alarming. There were maps of her land, notes about the gate, even mentions of controlled access points. Someone had documented every inch of her property. Emma leaned back in her seat, heart pounding. She felt both terrified and furious. This wasn't about rules or fire safety. This was about control. They wanted to intimidate her, manipulate her, and keep her trapped. And they had done it with precision. Her mind raced with questions. How far would they go? Was the HOA acting alone, or were there others helping them? Had they planned this entire scenario, waiting for the right moment to strike? The thought made her shiver. Emma knew she had to act carefully. Charging back to the cabin recklessly could be dangerous. But leaving it alone meant giving them control. She needed leverage, proof, something that would protect her when confronting them. She decided to start documenting everything: tire tracks, footprints, surveillance devices, and every letter or email. Every detail mattered. As she moved along the perimeter of her property, she noticed a small, hidden trail leading away from the cabin. It was narrow, almost invisible unless you knew it was there. Curious, she followed it, careful not to leave her own tracks. The trail led to a small, concealed shed she hadn't seen before. Inside, she found more surveillance equipment, stacks of HOA documents, and even cameras aimed at the cabin. Emma's breath caught. This was a base of operations, a hidden control center. Someone had been watching her for weeks, maybe months, planning every detail of the lockdown. She snapped photos with her phone as evidence, careful to stay hidden. Every file, every device, every document was proof. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. Emma froze. Someone was coming. She ducked behind the shed, heart pounding. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. Whoever it was paused near the shed. She could hear their breath, steady, calm. Then, silence. The footsteps faded. Emma exhaled slowly, realizing she had narrowly avoided being seen. Her mind was racing. She had discovered the truth. The HOA was not just a simple association, they were organized, watching her, and had planned the lockdown. But she now had proof, evidence she could use. She also realized something else: she couldn't confront them blindly. She needed a strategy, allies, and a way to protect herself. As the morning mist lifted, Emma looked back at the cabin in the distance. The gate still stood locked, a symbol of the control someone had tried to impose. But she felt a spark of determination. She now had knowledge, evidence, and the will to fight back. The real battle was just beginning. The HOA had underestimated her. And Emma was ready. The first sound Emma heard was the click of a car door. She had returned to the edge of her property at night, carrying her evidence, photos, HOA letters, and a small recorder she had set up in the shed. The moon was high, casting long, sharp shadows across the ground. Every tree looked like a dark figure waiting to move. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Tonight, she would confront them. There was no other choice. The gate loomed in the distance, still locked, still a symbol of the control someone had tried to impose over her. But Emma was no longer the same person who had stumbled blindly into the woods. She had spent days gathering proof, understanding their tactics, watching them. She knew they were organized. She knew they were watching her. And now, she was ready. From behind a tree, she saw two figures emerge. They were dressed in dark jackets, moving confidently, as if they owned the place. One carried a clipboard, the other a small device, maybe a camera. Emma's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. She stepped into the open, letting the flashlight illuminate her face. "Emma," one of them said calmly, almost too calmly. "We need to talk." Her stomach twisted. Calm. That was how they always started, like they were in control, like they had the power. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Not completely. She held up the recorder. "I know everything. The gate, the surveillance, the warnings. I have proof of all of it." The two men exchanged a glance. The one with the clipboard frowned. "You shouldn't be here alone. It's dangerous." Emma's hands tightened around the recorder. "I've been in danger for weeks. You locked my gate, watched my every move. I have every letter, every email, every device you left around. This ends tonight." There was a tense silence. The hum she had heard before, faint and mechanical, seemed to rise again somewhere in the woods. Emma's ears strained, listening. Whoever had orchestrated this was still near. But she didn't back down. "You don't understand," the man said, his voice low. "We're just enforcing rules. Protecting the property. It's for your own safety." Emma laughed, but it was bitter. "Protecting me? By locking me in my own land? By watching me like I'm a criminal? This isn't protection. This is control. And it's illegal." The second man stepped forward, trying to grab the recorder. Emma recoiled. "Don't touch me," she shouted. Her voice echoed in the night. The shadows of the trees seemed to stretch toward them, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "You don't know what you're dealing with," the first man warned. "The HOA isn't just letters and fines. It's rules, enforcement, consequences." Emma's mind raced. She thought of the shed, the hidden cameras, the small notes, and every detail she had collected. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with. And I'm not afraid anymore. You can try to intimidate me, but I have proof. The police, the law, they'll be on my side. You can't control me here." For a moment, the two men hesitated. Emma saw uncertainty flicker in their eyes. They weren't expecting resistance like this. They weren't expecting someone who had prepared, who had evidence, who refused to be cowed. The first man reached for a small device on his belt, but Emma raised her flashlight, pointing it directly at him. The sudden light made him pause. Emma's heart pounded, but she felt the surge of power. She wasn't trapped anymore, not really. She had options, and she had courage. "You've been watching me for weeks," she said, her voice steady. "Tracking my movements, setting up cameras, leaving warnings. Why? Because you thought I would be afraid. But I'm done being afraid. The gate is open now in my mind, and you can't lock me in with fear." A faint rustle came from the woods. Emma's eyes darted to the shadows, flashlight scanning. She knew someone or something was still there, observing. The tension in the air was thick, almost physical. The first man finally spoke, his tone sharper now. "You could make this easy. Walk away, follow the rules, pay your fines. No one needs to get hurt." Emma shook her head. "It's too late for that. You've crossed the line. You've treated my property, my life, like a game. I won't let you do it anymore." The second man stepped back. He glanced at the first, then at Emma. "You really have it all, don't you? The evidence?" "Yes," Emma said. "Every email, every letter, every camera. I even have a recording of your employees talking about me. If you touch me, or try anything, it's all over for you." For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees, carrying the faint hum from the gate area. Then, slowly, the first man sighed. "We underestimated you." Emma didn't lower her guard. She stayed alert, scanning the shadows. "Underestimating me won't happen again. If you want to avoid the authorities, you leave now. And you leave me alone." The men exchanged one last glance. Then, silently, they stepped back, disappearing into the darkness, leaving Emma alone. The hum faded. The gate was still locked physically, but in a strange way, it felt open. She had won this moment, not by brute force, but by courage, intelligence, and preparation. Emma stood there, shaking but triumphant. Her cabin, her land, and her freedom had been challenged, and she had defended them. But she also knew this wasn't the end. The HOA had power, and they wouldn't forget this night. She had won the battle, but the war for her peace, her privacy, and her rights might still lie ahead. As she walked back to the cabin, flashlight in hand, Emma felt a new sense of strength. She had faced fear, confrontation, and intimidation, and she had survived. The gate might still be locked, but she had found a way to unlock the most important thing: control over her own life. And somewhere in the shadows, the faint sound of movement reminded her that vigilance would always be necessary. But for now, she was ready for whatever came next. The first light of dawn painted the cabin in pale gold, filtering through the trees like a promise of a new beginning. Emma stood at the edge of her property, staring at the locked gate. It had been hours since the confrontation, yet the weight of the night still pressed on her chest. The woods were quiet now, almost eerily so, as if holding its breath in respect or maybe in warning. She ran her fingers over the wooden fence. It was solid, unyielding, the same gate that had trapped her for days. But now, it no longer felt like a prison. Something had shifted. She had faced the people who had tried to control her, gathered proof of their plans, and survived. The gate was still locked physically, but she felt a strange freedom she had never felt before. Emma's mind replayed the events in fragments: the metallic click at night, the locked gate, the footprints, the hum in the distance, the hidden cameras, and the final confrontation. Each moment had tested her courage and patience, forcing her to think faster, act smarter, and confront her deepest fears. She realized she had grown stronger, more alert, and more confident than ever before. Walking back to the cabin, she noticed small details she hadn't seen before. The dirt on the ground, once intimidating, now seemed like clues in a puzzle she had solved. The scattered leaves, the broken branches, even the faint hums in the distance, all signs she had learned to interpret. Emma smiled faintly. She had been forced to pay attention, to see things she might have overlooked in her peaceful retreat. Inside the cabin, she set her evidence carefully on the kitchen table: photos, letters, emails, and recordings. They were proof of the HOA's overreach, proof of her struggle, proof of her survival. She realized these items were more than evidence, they were reminders of her resilience. She had faced fear, isolation, and intimidation and emerged stronger. Emma sat on the porch, sipping coffee, letting the sunlight warm her face. The birds were singing again, and the wind rustled through the pine trees like a gentle lullaby. For the first time in days, she felt a quiet calm settle over her. But beneath the calm, there was an awareness, a sharp edge that reminded her, the HOA might not give up so easily. They had power, resources, and influence. And while she had won this round, the threat of future conflicts lingered. She thought about the people behind the gate, the hidden cameras, and the warning notes. They had underestimated her. They had assumed fear could control her. But she had learned that courage didn't mean the absence of fear, it meant acting despite it. And she had acted. Emma looked at the forest beyond her property. The shadows no longer seemed menacing, they seemed like old friends, witnesses to her triumph. She had learned to navigate them, to interpret the signs, to move with caution and intelligence. The woods had taught her lessons about vigilance, strategy, and self-reliance. Her thoughts drifted to the future. The HOA might still attempt to enforce rules, send letters, or test boundaries. But Emma now had confidence, knowledge, and proof. She could protect herself and her property. She could challenge attempts to intimidate her. She was no longer a passive owner of the land, she was an active guardian, alert and aware. As the sun climbed higher, Emma decided to take a walk around her property. She moved slowly, observing every detail. The gate, the trees, the small paths leading into the woods, all were familiar now, each holding memories of fear, struggle, and ultimately, triumph. She smiled at the thought, her land had tested her, and she had passed. Reaching the small clearing near the fire pit, Emma paused. She remembered the nights spent trapped, the fear that had clawed at her, and the shadows that seemed to follow her. She thought about how fragile peace can feel, how easily control can be taken away. And she realized that true security doesn't come from fences, gates, or letters, it comes from awareness, preparation, and courage. Emma sat on the edge of the clearing, letting the sunlight warm her face. She reflected on the ordeal, understanding that it had changed her. She was no longer just a visitor on her land. She was a protector, a strategist, someone who could face fear and remain in control. The gate was still there, the HOA still existed, but their power over her mind and spirit had been broken. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, and Emma felt a subtle thrill. The world was unpredictable, sometimes hostile, sometimes indifferent. But she was ready. She had learned to face the unknown, to move carefully, and to act decisively. The locked gate, once a symbol of fear, was now a reminder of her strength. As she rose to walk back to the cabin, Emma glanced once more at the shadows of the forest. Somewhere, faint and distant, she thought she saw movement. A reminder that vigilance would always be necessary. But she didn't flinch. She smiled faintly, confident. She had faced the shadows before, and she had survived. Back inside, she placed the evidence in a secure folder. She knew it could be used if the HOA escalated. But for now, she let herself relax. The cabin was quiet, peaceful. The sun reflected off the windows, warm and golden. Emma felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had been tested, challenged, and even trapped, but she had found freedom and courage. Before leaving the porch, she whispered to herself, almost like a promise, "This is my land. My life. My rules. No one can take that away from me." And with that, Emma turned toward the cabin, ready to live her life fully, aware that the woods, the gate, and even the HOA might try again. But she would be ready. The calm had returned, but the lessons remained. She had faced fear and emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakable. The gate was still locked. The HOA still existed. But Emma had unlocked something far more important: her courage, her strength, and her freedom.